We've been asked to do a video on internalized racial superiority. My name is Sandy Burnaby. I'm a member of the Anti-Racist Alliance. And
my name is Steve Nilsson, also a member of the Anti-Racist Alliance and intern with the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond.
The Anti-Racist Alliance is a collective of human service social workers and other human service practitioners and educators who came together about a dozen years ago because we all took the Undoing Racism workshop and we understood that our profession needed this. We needed an Undoing Racism and analysis so that the work that we were engaged in would have equity, that we would begin to see equitable outcomes, because the outcomes that we have in every institution and every system disproportionately and negatively impact people of color. So we started organizing, and it is now 2013, and we're coming up on our 127th Undoing Racism workshop, and over 7,200 people have come through it. The first time I did the Undoing Racism workshop, I was pretty upset. I was really upset that we had gone to myself and other social workers had gone to the finest schools of social work in the city and in the country, actually, and had never received this analysis. In Undoing Racism, the workshop is grounded in community organizing and history, and it was the first time that we really started to grapple with the enormity and the depth and the breadth of a racialized society. And really, the Undoing Racism workshop gave us a whole framework to understand that it was done, and if it was done, then it could be undone. And so we started organizing. This idea of internalized racial oppression is one of the principles that the People's Institute has given us over the years of their organizing. They've been in existence for over 35 years. They understand the enormity, the ideology in this country that is so highly racialized. They came up with like 10 principles to help guide our work. And as we start working those principles, it becomes a way of life. So we've been asked to look at one of the principles, which is internalized racial oppression, and there are two sides to that coin. One is internalized racial superiority, which is what is experienced and internalized by white people, and the other is internalized racial inferiority, which is the messages and the socialization internalized by people of color. So how I came into the work and my understanding of Undoing Racism and my work around addressing internalized racial superiority is after I did that workshop, I realized that I was trapped in this system too. And that if I did nothing, I was a perpetrator. If I did nothing, I was an enabler. And all I had to do was to be a well-intended white person to keep this structure going. And so I came into it never even thinking that it would take my life. And it took my life. I gladly give my life to this work because of the work of dealing with internalized racial superiority has humanized me and has given me a life worth living. And I've done a lot of work. I got in, I'm 60 years old now. And I say that this is the most important work that we could be doing in our lives. So to have you as a partner in this, along with so many other students and so many other people, I mean hundreds of people. We have a growing family, and the New York City area is just part of building a net that works across this country. There are allies all over. The People's Institute has trained hundreds and thousands of people in their Undoing Racism community organizing workshop experience, and so we benefit from being a part of that movement. And going through the stages of my own development has helped me to become a proud white person, clear about the work that I need to do, and reaching other white people to do the work that we need to do to undo the oppressive systems that we've created. So Stu, why don't you talk a little bit about how you got into the work?
Sure. Well, I feel very grateful to be able to do this work alongside you, Sandy, and the collective. And definitely been quite a journey for me. I came out here to New York to go to social work school. I had heard about the Institute, the People's Institute out on the West Coast, and I was curious. I found out there was an internship available, and so I pursued it, but I was conflicted because of my own past experience with white anti-racists, and I kind of let that make me a little bit unsure if this was really what I wanted to do. And I realized that even through that process of having the choice to decide whether or not I participated in anti-racist work showed that I had some privilege that other people didn't necessarily have. So once I made the decision to start the work with the Institute, basically I started hanging out with a bunch of anti-racists, people of color and other white anti-racists, and I began to be humbled in so many different ways. And I was a little bit confused too when I first started hanging out, because I was hearing different stories from different people about things that didn't necessarily make sense. And then I took my first Undoing Racism workshop. And there was a reason why I had been confused, and it was really because I didn't have the analysis that the Undoing Racism workshop had offered me, and the language that allowed us to have a conversation where we were on the same page. And so my first experience at the workshop was just completely floored, completely like mind-bending. I asked a lot of questions. I thought asking a lot of questions was really important, and it has been in my experience as a white person. My curiosity, engaging, trying to understand, trying to get the answer, trying to get there, is something that I've been kind of culturized to do within my white culture. And I was practicing that very much in my first workshop, especially after the workshop was over. I had the privilege of hanging out with two of the workshop leaders who were so kind to listen to every question that I asked and to answer every one of them. And I realized later that I had probably exhausted them with my questions. And that was like the beginning of an amazing journey for me, especially when confronted by Sandy about that experience, which made me think, wow, like this is quite a privilege that I've always seen as a positive, good thing. But in this context, is not necessary and is actually harmful for me to participate in.
Right.
And so
I just wanted to add to that,
yeah.
and the piece of it that doesn't work is how white people feel that we could learn from the experiences of people of color, and so often ask questions and tell me this and tell me that, and exhaust people of color so that we can grow. And I remember when I was at Barnard College at Columbia University, we were doing some of this work, and I was in my early formation of understanding my own racial identity, and I had a colleague, a woman of color, and I was asking her questions, and she said to me, you know something, I find it very interesting. When you want to learn about anything, you're Googling, you're asking people, you know exactly where to go, what books to read. She said, but about your whiteness, she said, you just ask me. She said, I'm tired. You're burning me out, Sandy. Just go and learn about white culture. Learn about your whiteness. And so I came to that, and it was like an embarrassment, that I had to be told that, why is it, when it comes to race, I'm your teacher, but with everything else, you know where to go to get the information.
yeah, and at that point, it was also Sandy's challenge to me to ask the questions of myself.
That's right.
The questions that I was so open to just asking that were falling out of my mouth constantly. Because I wanted to know. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't have the answer. I didn't know what was best to do, and I didn't realize that I couldn't learn from somebody else telling me what to do or telling me what the right answer was. I was going to have to learn through my own process of going inside and of exploring my own life and process as I walk through the world. And that's really where I've done a lot of the majority of my learning. So
I just want to pipe in here with this one thing about leadership development. One of the principles that the People's Institute talks about is leadership development. And part of dealing with my own internalized racial superiority, I understood that I need to learn, I needed and continue to need to learn how to take leadership from people of color. So in my organizing, when we started organizing, it wasn't just me, it was myself and a whole collective of people that put that first workshop together. And my dear friend and partner in crime, as we say, Mary, is a woman of color, definitely a leader in this movement, and we'd been working together. And over and over and over again, I would jump out and make decisions. You know, there wasn't anything in my experience, in my socialization, in my understanding, that jumping out and taking initiative wasn't a rewarded thing. And also, as I look back, there wasn't any place that I had experienced taking leadership from people of color. It just wasn't there. It was something that really I needed to really internalize. And our friendship is solid today, but I can't tell you how many times, like being asked to go to a retreat, being asked to speak on behalf of this work, where I would go out on my own, rather than to respect and understand and respond to that whole thing of accepting leadership of color and bringing Mary along, or saying, Mary, can you do it, or shall we be doing this together, or what do you think? It took a long time for me to understand. Command and control, initiative, jumping out was in fact what the problem was, and how often I did that. I think at one point I went and represented the movement, you know, down in another state, and she didn't even know about it. And those are the reasons why relationships are fractured, and that's what continues the pain. Here we are working together, and I'm doing anti-racist work, and I'm still able to just move out and make decisions and don't understand, and at that point couldn't pull back. I even have the trouble today. If I see that something is not happening, I have ideas. It's just something I just want to jump in and do it. So that whole thing about pulling it back, and I know that we've talked about that need to pull back as a white person.
Definitely. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about my own experience as a community organizer, and being kind of oftentimes a leader in places, and not necessarily, like, definitely being a we person, like I'm taking people's ideas, I'm taking people's contributions, but I get to decide what I do with that. I'm not necessarily asking for permission on what it is that we're doing. Like, we're deciding together that we're going to do something, but I actually have a lot of control on what happens sometimes when I have been a community organizer and kind of leader in a movement. And so, like, now just speaking about, like, leadership development and thinking about accountability, and coming into the People's Institute. I mean, there was a perfect example where I was working with another person who works through the NASW on the Undoing Racism Internship Project, and they were tabling one day at Hunter College, and I was like, oh, perfect, I'll table with you, we can partner in this, and we can work together, because I wanted to get people signed up for the Undoing Racism training, and I knew that they were doing stuff for Undoing Racism too, so I thought, perfect opportunity for us to partner. Well, the way it ended up was I kind of decided what I was going to do at that table, and I spent the whole day doing that thing, and I didn't necessarily check in with my Europe colleagues on what it was that they were doing that I had invited myself to, and that we could work together on. I had just decided, I had taken over, and occasionally I remember saying, oh, here, my colleague is doing this thing, you should check it out. But it wasn't something that came so naturally to me. The thing that came naturally was me kind of dominating the space and taking it over and deciding what I was going to do. So,
you know, you said something very interesting. Just before you gave that example, you said, I'm used to taking ideas and taking suggestions and then deciding what I want to do. And that's what internalized racial superiority is. I have the privilege, and I feel I have a right to take. And you just gave the example, I'm going to take charge, you know? It's just like, and it's just so deeply ingrained in us.
Right. It's not something that we examine often. We even know that we're doing oftentimes. It just happens. And so what Undoing Racism has done for me is allowed me the opportunity to, like, actually, wow, like, see this. I saw this, I was thinking about it after the fact, and I realized, oh my gosh, this is what happened. And I was able to take the opportunity to sit with my colleague and actually have a debrief on what had happened and talking about areas that I know that I need to be growing in, and also, like, you know, apologize for taking up so much space without really asking permission or finding out what will be useful for both of us working together in that situation. So
that whole thing about taking charge, taking over, I mean, it is just like the air we breathe. I was at a meeting just Friday, and we're doing anti-racist work, and so we want to lift white anti-racist men, right? Working in collaboration with women of color. But what I got to see was that we just have to be so vigilant that the natural tendency is for us to then lift the white anti-racist man, right? As it's so great that he's being anti-racist that he still then gets lifted, and not really see that we need to take leadership from the women of color there, and that it's the women of color that need to be lifted, and that we need to pull him back, that he needs to pull back, and we need to pull back so that that meeting can flow, and we don't replicate white institutional culture even as we do anti-racist work.
Sure.
Right? Because it was still the white guy at the top of the head, right? It was still there, and there I...
Definitely. Right, and I mean, another experience of of my superiority is even at my internship, I asked a woman of color who was an office manager at the school I'm working at, can you please help me with my printer? This printer isn't working. I need to do this. I told her what I wanted to do, and she suggested I do something very specific, but it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to do, and the printer hadn't been working. So I said thank you, and I did what I wanted to do, and I ended up running into a whole bunch of snags along the way, and I realized that this woman had been here a lot longer than me. She knew the printer, she knew how its quirks were, and it was me, very, very, very new on the job, and had already decided what I wanted to do and asked for help, but didn't get the answer I wanted. And so I did what I wanted, and I came across all of the snags that she already knew about, that she was trying to, like, tell me about.
And inadvertently dissed her, you know, disregarded,
Exactly.
discounting, and on and on and on. And
yeah.
that's the other thing that we do. Like, we get the information, it's kind of like, oh, I got it, I got it, I got it, and then we just want to move ahead, rather than sitting there and really digesting it.
Right.
And the difference between I get it, I get it, I get it, and actually being it.
Right.
You know,
And
the work is intense.
And having understood the importance of accountability at that point, when I realized what I had done, I did go and I spoke to this woman, and I really did apologize. I said, look, I'm really sorry that I thought I had the right answer, even though you had given me the answer that was proper. Because I feel like now that I understand my part in things, that it's such a natural thing for me to do these things. Like, I have to be willing to accept it when I see it, and recognize it when I see it happening. So that's part of the undoing racism process, is recognizing it and acknowledging it, and knowing, because of that bad, terrible experience, it's embarrassing to even talk about. That's really where my learning happens. Not because I asked somebody a question about, like, how does racial superiority work, but it's because I participated in something, I saw that something because of the analysis, and then now I have the opportunity, if ever, which it's going to happen plenty more times, where I ask for somebody's opinion. That happens, that I am aware very acutely of the possibility of those situations, and dressing myself differently.
The other thing is that, you know, just notice how often we say I. One of our organizers says that the difference between illness and wellness is the difference between I and we. And for white people to move from I to we is one task, you know? That's our problem, you know. I can do it, I can do it, I can do it, right? And that's the work. How do we pull back the I and understand that the we needs to move together forward, and that we-ness needs to be led by people of color? And that the I has to be in the service of that. And that's the work of undoing internalized racial superiority. And other thing, in closing, I think we should just close it up now. What do you think?
Sure.
That anything that I feel natural doing is white, and therefore has created this problem. So if it feels natural, how do we get to train ourselves to say, if it feels like, oh, we should be doing the next thing, maybe we should question that and come back and get some, I mean, not every single thing we do, but if it has to do with a decision to be made, right? To be in relationship with people of color in the movement and to really take that leadership and collect that wisdom over time. That we move away from jumping, command and control, I can do it, I can do it, I can make it happen, I know how to do it, to we, and that the I-ness in that we is in the service of that.
Definitely.
Definitely that. Anyway, anything else?
No, and I also appreciate you saying that, because even as a community organizer, I have said we so often, but I haven't said we in a way that was accountable. And that's one of the biggest differences now, I find, is that I've made a lot of mistakes with we in the past, but at this point I'm willing to wait around a little longer to know that it's going to be stronger, even though it might be slower. And the answer is going to be wiser, is what it comes down to when we are working together. So.
And that the we is led by people of color.
Exactly.
And we understand that. Yes, we should move forward. And the collective voice of people of color with a common analysis that we all share, right?
Definitely.
It's a good start.
Thanks for having us.